All right, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to our next segment, which is From Character Sheet to X Sheet with Chris DeFario. With credits on some of the most successful and innovative films in the past decade, including Gravity, Ready Player One, and Happy Feet. Chris DeFario is also previously the president of DreamWorks Animation and instrumental in the creation of Warner Animation Group. Chris, I'd like to welcome you to the panel.
Thank you. Terrific. Is that you, Matt? Where are you? You've disappeared. Okay. I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of those movies, perhaps, but really to talk about Tom and Jerry, which is the latest film that I produced for Warner Brothers. It's a hybrid film. I think maybe some of you caught a glimpse of the trailer in the past week. We had, I think, on Warner Brothers Network alone, had 10 million views. But I want to take you back kind of to where this came from and get you through, show you a little bit of the trailer, show you some of the work behind it, and I hope give you a better insight into how we think about, or at least I think about, hybrid films. Tom and Jerry was in development for, it must have been 15 years when I was hanging around Warner Brothers. There was always a desire to turn this into a feature film, this wonderful franchise. But it was a bit of a struggle because you go, what kind of story should you tell with Tom and Jerry, two characters who have such a clear and simple conflict? Do you tell an origin story? Or do you do a story about them becoming friends maybe and they solve something? And I think some of those were attempted, but really it never really took hold. And I think it had a lot to do with the characters, because what you don't want with the characters like Tom and Jerry is for them to do what other characters do in movies, which is to arc, to develop, to solve a problem. I mean, I think the last thing you'd ever want to do with Tom and Jerry is have them solve their problem, because their problem is the nature of all of the humor. Eventually, the project made its way over to WAG, the Warner Animation Group, and there I think the thinking changed. And we began to think about, how could we do a compelling story, a compelling journey for these characters that in some way exists outside of their conflict? You know, let's find a story where they don't have to solve what's always, been entertaining about them. It's funny, I remember the first time that the director, Tim Story, and I got together to talk about this movie. We were trying thinking about these characters, and we realized that in some respects, they're kind of like siblings. Tim has two daughters. I have two sons. We have great memories of like reaching back in the back seat of the car, trying to separate them. And latching onto that, I think, gave us insight into how to tell a story. Because the one thing we know about siblings, particularly those that are at each other's throats all the time, is, I think, two things. One is that no matter how much they may profess to hate each other, they're probably going to be the greatest defenders of the other should they ever come under any kind of duress. And I think you see that in the Tom and Jerry cartoons with characters like Spike. I think the other thing you know about characters, about siblings, is that it's really hard as a parent to take them someplace in public. So with that, we sort of said, okay, I think we got an angle on this. Let's get the two siblings, let's get Tom and Jerry, and let's get them out of the house and take them someplace. And in the case of our movie, that place was a fancy hotel. And so it's in this hotel where Jerry seeks refuge after being chased by Tom. And of course, a hotel doesn't want a mouse there. That creates a problem for them. So they need to hire a cat, and lo and behold, they hire Tom. And now suddenly we're back in a very organic way to Tom and Jerry, this time taking place in an elegant hotel. Now, of course, we flesh out something like that with a bunch of human characters and stories. It gives, I think, some increased emotional stakes. But in the end, what you're doing with a movie like this is trying to find a way to effectively and organically justify Tom and Jerry creating mayhem in a place, in this case, a hotel. So as I mentioned earlier, the trailer to the movie was released this week. And the response was incredible. I don't know how many of you on this webinar have seen it, but if you have, you're going to get to see it again. And if you haven't, here's your chance. So Matt, if you have that, let's put the trailer up.
and Jerry are about to start over.
'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do. Oh yeah.
In the big city.
Ain't my fault that I'm not here getting loose. Gotta blame it on the goose.
This hotel has been host to 4 presidents, 3 popes, 2 kings, and we're about to host the wedding of the century.
Do you think you're qualified to take on this position?
I shine under pressure, like a diamond. Or Rihanna.
One other thing. We have a mouse problem.
With the what now?
Gonna shine. I was born like this, don't even gotta try.
Oh, wow, this is so detailed. We could hire an exterminator, or we can leverage millions of years of predatory evolution.
Got the baddest lie.
This one.
If a picture of these mouses tweeted out to Instabook Face or TikTok, we will be ruined.
No, sir, that's not gonna happen. That rodent is toast.
Not let this hotel be ruined by a cat and a mouse.
Yeah. Which looks similar.
I think I might have just pulled this off.
Hey. Um, hey, Matt, did that even play?
I'm sorry, were you
I apologize. I just want to understand because on my end, it didn't play. It played, it was a jumbled kind of, it didn't play. Did it play successfully?
we were getting some weird lag over here as well.
Wow, I have a lot of stuff to show. So if it's not going to play, we should figure that out. Wow. Okay. What do you think the issue is? Because if we don't have successful video playback, I probably don't want to play anything else.
I think that might be the largest video that we have for today. Let's try everything else and see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll cut it.
Okay. All right. Well, the trailer's really good. And you guys, anybody here who just saw that, which on my end looked, I mean, what's funny is that the movie is really kind of got a lot of energy and it's got a wonderful chaotic feel to it, but not that. That was over the top for me seeing that. So it's a little odd. So if you have a chance, please go online, take a look at the trailer. I think you'll understand both the ambition, the tone, and the feel of the film, which I'm enormously proud of. So I hope you have anybody listening to this, I hope do take a look at that. One of the funny things in the trailer, which I was going to jump off on here, is which I get a kick out of, is that in that trailer, if you were able to see it, the open has Tom and Jerry walking along a road, and then Tom gets hit by a bus, and then the story goes to New York. That actually isn't in the movie anymore. That open, that was actually the original open to the movie, was we thought, how do we get, remember I was talking about how do we get into Tom and Jerry? How do we get them to transport someplace they can take their conflict away? And what we did, we had this great open, I thought it was really fun open, which is where Tom and Jerry effectively destroy the house they live in and get kicked out. And that little scene that's at the start of that trailer is them on their way to New York. Now it's been repurposed for the trailer, I think in a very successful way. But in the end, we looked at that and we realized, no matter how entertaining it was for the movie, it kind of slowed us down because people really know where they're going with Tom and Jerry. They know the conflict already going in. So when you see the trailer, you're seeing a little clip there of an old open to the movie. But we sort of advertised this conversation as a conversation about hybrid films. And so I'm going to try and give you my definition of it. I think for most people, hybrid films mean that you're going to have animated characters in a live action setting, or sometimes live action characters going to an animated world, or both, sometimes movies like Roger Rabbit. For me, a hybrid film really means that you're going to have two or more, but at least two simultaneous independent workflows that are going to have to find a way to work together. In the case of Tom and Jerry, certainly in the case of a couple of the other movies I've produced, it's going to be an animation pipeline and a visual effects / live action film pipeline. And those are completely different technologies. They involve very different crews and talent, which is interesting. And then they involve very different cultures. The live action visual effects world is about shots, and there's often, I would just say, much upfront commitment and certainty. Animation pipelines are about lower costs in the beginning, and and you're putting off certainty till the very end. And those things kind of often work at cross purposes. And so trying to produce a hybrid film is finding a way to reconcile those two different pipelines so that they can work together. When we first started this movie, Tom and Jerry, I think the studio thought, well, perhaps we could work this thing all the way through a visual effects pipeline. And that would sort of point to characters that were going to be photoreal and full of volume and would sit very organically and very real in our world. Now I got to say, as anybody who's a fan knows, there's sort of several eras of Tom and Jerry, including the most recent sort of animated features or direct-to-DVD features that were done by Warner Brothers starting like in '92 and came all the way up until recently. But the Tom and Jerry that Tim, the director, and I really wanted to focus on was, of course, the Hanna-Barbera, the 1940s, 60s, maybe a little bit of the Chuck Jones in the early 60s thrown in. And what defines those shorts, of course, is the violence and the extraordinary violence. And it's really funny because earlier today I was talking to my assistant going, I don't want to say the word violent in this presentation so many times. Are there other words? And we come up with things like antics or physicality, but in the end, it is. They're really wonderfully violent cartoons. And I say this to say that when we were thinking about a fully CG version of the movie, and as I say, with characters that sit very convincingly in our world, you suddenly go, oh, well, we can't possibly do the kind of things they did in the cartoons if we have characters that look real. That's gonna blow up in our face. And we had to be concerned about the violence to begin with, but that seems so inappropriate in today's world. So we thought, well, we have two choices. We either commit to CG and scale back the antics and physicality in the movie, or we abandon it and go back to 2D and try and sort of make that work, make that credible and believable. And obviously, as you can tell by the trailer, if you saw the trailer, that we opted to go with the 2D. And I promise you right now, their physicality in this movie rivals that of the original cartoons. I mean, I think, and some of it, in fact, mirrors original cartoons. In that trailer, again, you might have caught a glimpse of a gag where Jerry moves a mouse hole and Tom slams into the wall. That is pulled directly from the shorts, except in that, of course, before it was Tom pulling it to gag on Jerry, so we turned it on its head a bit. But so once we had decided on this movie to sort of go 2D and try and be as true as we could to the spirit of the original shorts, we began a look development process. And that's more than what it sounds, because look development is sure arriving at the characters and how they look and somewhat the world of the movie, like what are the color schemes and things. But I think in a hybrid movie, look development is a more ambitious undertaking, because what you're really doing is you're going to sell the audience on an idea of a world where what you're presenting them is possible or at least credible. So you're going to say, look, animated characters live in this world, but what's the physics of it? How do people treat them? And often a lot of what we're relying on is how the rest of the characters will treat our animated characters in that world to define effectively the tone of it. In Tom and Jerry, cartoon characters are all animals. In fact, all animals are cartoon characters, period, in the entire movie and the entire world of this movie. And people have no notice of that. There's no comments ever made. No one's ever defined as a cartoon character. Nobody ever looks askew or differently at somebody because they're a cartoon. And so immediately the credibility of our venture here is made apparent by the actors surrounding the cartoon characters, just simply the way they treat them. It's kind of an incredible leap of faith, and one that I think concerns anybody doing these kinds of movies, but we bought into it, and I feel that it was enormously successful, that you just watch our characters, Chloe Moritz, Michael Pena, treat Tom and Jerry as if they're just another cat and a dog, and suddenly the movie starts to make sense. So anyway, so we're talking about a hybrid movie, these two pipelines. So the history of making this movie was we had to simultaneously prep a full animated movie and then a live action movie at the same time. The thing about the animated movie that we're making, of course, is that what we're trying to pull most out of this process is maybe not all of the processes that are associated with animation. I mean, we did character design, we did storyboard every sequence. Those became animatics, and those guided camera placement and a lot of set design. But what we really wanted was the culture. We really wanted to find what is that magical thing that it exists in the iterative story-based animation process, and how can we get that to infuse our characters' animation? And so, again, I'll just say, because I think it's in the trailer and I know it's in the movie, the animation in the film is fantastic. It's a really strong reflection, and I think it is only that because we committed to a pipeline that was outside of the live action film. Now, of course, there was still the live action film. So at Leavesden Studios in London, where we had 10 artists upstairs drawing the movie. And by the way, those were artists that, oh, so wonderful. Many of them had worked on Who Framed Roger Rabbit with Richard Williams, guys like Uli Meyer and Rob Stephenhagen and Neil Boyle. They all came from their rich tradition in the UK of animation. So we had up there at this Hollywood studio, at this UK studio, Leavesden, we had this full mini animation studio existing. And then downstairs, of course, was stages that we were building sets on and doing a live action film. I think all the guys in animation were really suspicious that the work that they were doing was in some ways probably just exploratory and that it was going to get tossed out, but it actually became the guiding principle for all of our photography. I want to show you a couple things here. Maybe we can see if these will work. I have some character sheets that Uli and Dean Roberts did. I just love the way that this is really when we decided this and the character. But yes, I'm going to show you. So, Matt, can you bring up the character sheets? Is that fun? These are a couple. So this is nice. Butch. This is just scroll through them. There's just about 4 or 5 of these. But I bring these up to show both. You can keep going, Matt, to the next ones. Yeah, that the incredible skill, but also you can see here there's a commitment to the style that 40, 50 years ago. Now, these were all, of course, poses that we then took and began to see if we could replicate them in CG, because the one thing about a hybrid movie is that you're going to move from the 2D pipeline. You're going to have to replicate what you arrive at with a 2D process. Try and replicate that with 3D tools before ultimately flattening it again down to 2D. That's the path that we took. So out of some of those character sheets, we then put together, I'm going to show you 7 little, we called them tryouts, but these were just the animators that had been working primarily in CG, now working with the 2D animators to try and bring some of the tone and feel that you just saw into the characters in motion using a different tool set. So let's look at these. That's Butch and his gang. Again, these are never going to be in the movie. These are just very early days going, I wonder if we're going to be able to capture the feel that we're looking for. So that was a fun first test. And again, this is 6 months before we shot. One of the big questions you have when looking at these, and we had to deal with, is how much volume do we want on the character? So it's not just the, can we build the rigging that can act in this 2D way? And then we have to ask ourselves what the lighting and the volume. And I think in these early days, we began to really learned that we wanted to pull back on volume and really have them exist in a plain-ear way. Oh, that's it. So with those things in hand, we then began to build ultimately, which would be the machine to deliver the movie. And that was an extraordinary place in London, which was at the offices of a company called Framestore. We took over a floor. We had about 50 visual effects artists and the same space as 15 2D animators, and our edit rooms surrounded it. And then there were the executive offices there for the director and myself. And it created this environment which I had always dreamed of, particularly when I was running DreamWorks, which is just the most collaborative workspace that you could ever imagine. I want to talk about one other part of this, though, which is camera, because in doing a hybrid film, you really have to upfront address the idea of where's camera going to come from, because as you can imagine, in animatic, we're drawing for animation. We're trying to get the best animated performances. Sometimes, sure, you set some cameras, but for the most part, it's independent of that. You're looking for what's the best animated gag. In a live action film, you're setting cameras to live actors, and then there's this presumption within the production that we'll bump it over to visual effects, quote animation, visual effects, and they'll engineer the characters into that. That approach I consider to be sort of a creature effects movie, where you put the creature in response to the live actors. We really strive to turn this around and make Tom and Jerry's animation, arrived at through the animation pipeline, to drive where we put cameras. And I think we're reasonably successful. It's a real challenge for everybody. It's really one of those places where the cultures that I mentioned earlier, the culture of animation, the culture of live action, can collide. But I have a couple more clips I want to show you. One, there's 3 shots here that I'm going to show you they were from the trailer. And I think there's you'll see this sort of additive system. What you're going to see is how we drew them, shot plates, originally put some proxy models in there, then actually sketched over them, and then ultimately began to finish them. So let's run these 3 shots. Will we, Matt? Maybe give you an idea of what I'm talking about, the hybrid pipeline. So that's just a plate that we did rigs and explosions and green screens out of. Those are all just wires and things. Then we added in, we actually sketched with 2D over those plates on a Cintiq, many, many passes of that. That's then replaced with a rigged proxy model, which we then test whether that rigging can reflect. And we're constantly going back and forth between the two. And the final model comes in, which has more sophisticated rigging and can look like the 2D. And then in the end, there's a shot. So here's another plate from the same chase scene. What we had before this, of course, was a sketch, an illustration that showed what we intended to do. And that's what guided the camera work when we started, and this animation.
Don't sweat the technique.
There's one more, which are favorite elephants. This is a big back lot in Leavesden. So that kind of layering is many months in the making, and what I think you could pull out of that is that those are really the example of 2 very, very distinct and different pipelines coming together. Probably be remiss if I didn't mention then what of course happened midway through this movie, as with many movies, is the pandemic. And we had to adjust. We had fortunately, luckily, finished principal photography when we were working in London in that great space I just described with all the artists in one room. And that, of course, is exactly the wrong thing. And so within about 10 days of it becoming a reality in the world, we shut all of that down and went remote. We had hundreds of artists in Montreal, now hundreds of artists in London. I was in the Los Angeles. The director was in London for a while. The editor went back to Woodland Hills, and we've spent the last 8 months of this movie completely remote, doing everything on Zoom to finish this film. It's a combination of a lot of tools, Zoom and CineSync, as you can imagine, moving tons of media around. But we are, in 1 week, we will complete the film, which I'm pretty proud of, because it's extraordinary to work that way, to suddenly go from, if you imagine from where I started this conversation, it's that bringing these two pipelines together and trying to have them work hand in glove and doing that. That's it is hand in glove. It is physically to be together. To suddenly have that pulled apart was a challenge we were not prepared for, but we triumphed and we did an amazing job thanks to so many of these incredible artists that just showed up. And now every day we're on Zoom from 6:30 in the morning till 9 or 10 a.m. On various versions of Zoom and CineSync, completing the film. So we'll be done in a week. I will say one last thing. I want to show you one last video just because it's fun. We, of course, had a rap party. We did a rap video, which we showed at the party, which I only want to show because it really, one of the most important things if you're going to try and make a movie like this is you've got to have, everybody's got to sign on. And that includes the actors, because they're going to really, as I said earlier, they're going to give the gift of credibility to the idea that these characters who are 2D, because as I pointed out, we wanted them to be able to do all the things they did in the cartoons, but to make them real means that these actors and actresses, and they have to convey emotional reality in these scenes under kind of bizarre circumstances. So this is a fun little, but Matt, by the way, if this video doesn't play, we can just cut it out, but I hope it does because it's really cute.
One step beyond. Oh, come on, stop the pizza. You're making them so gorgeous. I've got it. Everyone keep going.
Who butchered these onions? Who? Oh, I don't know. Francois?
Oh, no!
And I tried setting you up on a date. We never heard back from you.
Popping bubbles.
No, the other one. No, the other one. That one.
Can you ride a hamster?
Oh, you can ride a hamster as long as you have enough of them.
Yeah.
You can ride them silly.
Great.
There's nothing like a well-trained hamster.
Hi, Dad.
Hey, Dad. Breathe in the mouse. Feel the mouse.
Oh, we got way big. We got way big.
Fuck you. I knew it.
All right. So that's Tom and Jerry. Matt?
Yeah, that looks amazing. We already have a lot of questions. I think we might have answered this one just through your examples, but I think this is a testament to the hybrid animation you guys were able to accomplish, because this first question is, are Tom and Jerry 3D character models, or are they traditional 2D?
So that's great. That is the, I mean, if there's a takeaway from here, it's that we animated them, built them, sketched them in 2D all the way. Then at a certain point, once we knew what we wanted them to do in animation, we then replicated that with a 3D model that was used to set cameras and ultimately to do preliminary composites. Then through a shader tool, we brought them back down to 2D, which creates problems because there's volume is introduced in that process, and then you have to deal with it. So a number of shots were sent back around, so we had to redo cameras on them and redo lighting so that we didn't inadvertently, suggest volume that wasn't there. But so in the end, those are 3D characters that have been rigged to behave like 2D and lit and shaded to look like 2D.
The next question is kind of asking, did you have to develop any new software or programs to make the characters look like what you wanted them to look like in the movie?
That's great. You always do on any of these kinds of films, but that we did with Framestore. And early on, we did some early testing with them. One of the things I'm most proud of, and it's the smallest, littlest thing, which is that the hard lines that we have in there indicating where we would replace volume with as in the animator does, with just a thin line there. We tried to find a way to automate that. So we would, working with 3D, there would be the volume of a cheek, then knowing we would be able to mark that and know that we were going to flatten that cheek, but we still wanted the cheek. So with a little bit of light, you can shine it. But if you define the cheek with light, then you're giving it 3D volume. So we would have to bring in a line as they would in a 2D cartoon. And we found a way to, I want to say, semi-automate that. We probably got about 60% of the line work done through some software written by Framestore, and the rest was done by hand.
We saw a lot of some of the behind the scenes there with like the, what you had set up. This next person wants to know, for the characters, the animated characters, did you use any motion capture for them?
I feel like it's a trick question. No, we didn't use any motion capture for them. No, in fact, it's a great question because what I'm talking about when I talk about the two pipelines, committing to building a small animation studio within a live action movie is committing to all of what comes with that. The very fact that it's not motion capture, it's not reflective of proper anatomy or of the subtleties or slave to the subtleties and nuances of motion capture or even the technology associated with it. Now, we really wanted what these animators, many of them, as I say, who go back to Roger Rabbit, we wanted what they bring to the table. And that meant absolutely not relying on anything like that or any simulations or motion capture.
And also the behind the scenes video, we saw like these masks that were used to represent the characters. This next question is asking, what's the purpose of those?
Yeah, well, so there's a couple. So when you're on the set, you have to do a few things. You want to find. Sometimes you just need to be able to set a camera. So you need to know. You need to have a realistic size of the object that's going to be there. So in a frame that's going to be over Tom's shoulder to a character, you want to have a Tom model that you can just put in front of the camera and go, okay, that's right. That's about the right height. So often those characters were just brought in so we could set cameras. But then we, as is not surprise to anybody, we found that the actors reacted much better to those, particularly if they were well puppeted. So we had some incredibly talented puppeteers. In fact, the puppeteer for Jerry was named Tom, and I don't think the puppeteer for Tom was named Jerry, but these puppeteers were fantastic, and they would really possess and own the characters. And so the first pass we would do before we would shoot was we would do a pass with Chloe Grace Moritz, the actress, and our incredibly talented puppeteer, who's sort of treating it's a Bunroku puppet, right, directing it from behind, and would make all the movements and point at them and dart and move around and get these incredibly genuine reactions. And sometimes we just use those takes because the reactions from the actresses or actors were so good, and it creates a technical problem, so you have to obviously carve out the puppet. But that's really what they were there. They were there to just remind everybody of what it's really easy to forget, which is that the stars of the show are not on the set. And that's a hard one. That's a hard thing to you have to remind yourself that every day. I wrote that on a big thing in my office. Was they're just not here, and they're the stars.
Well, I think all that hard work paid off because it really looks like they're interacting in the film.
It's really convincing, and that's full credit to the actors. They're amazing, and they really bought into it. And you worry that they might not, and they might feel silly doing this, but we do things. You want to do things on a set, and I hope that last video showed you, like, if one of our actors or actresses is sitting by, the puppeteer will come over and sit Tom next to her and sort of start a pantomime conversation just to keep them alive. It's very hard because the movie is ultimately going to be told in a large part from their point of view. These two characters who are animated, they don't speak and they're not there. And so, there's a lot of process and protocol on a set around establishing point of view. So we went out of our way to try and make sure they were always present and there. I know it sounds it might even sound silly, but it was critical to making this thing work.
Yeah, and I don't think I can overstate enough just how close it looks to traditional animation.
But it is traditional animation. I want to make sure you know that. Mm-hmm. The performances you're seeing there were fully animated. It's at the last moment when we take those sketched out animation. That's what I hope you saw in the clips. And then we go back, and with those in hand, we take the 3D model and we replicate exactly what was done in 2D. And then we're A/Bing it the whole time. And then we're dealing, as I pointed out, with the volume and lighting issues that come with working in 3D after that. But those performances were all originated in 2D.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. How much it looks like the original Tom and Jerry cartoons.
That's a great compliment. I sure hope that's the case. I sure hope that's what everybody believes.
Yeah.
It's
did you guys
responsibility to take these characters into the real world?
Did you guys consult any animators from the original shorts?
I wish we had. We consulted animators who worked in that time and worked around Hanna-Barbera. And we did extraordinary research, and we brought together what I think is just some of the most talented, most experienced animators. These are guys that work exclusively in 2D and have for 40 or 50, 60 years now. So we had some really great pedigree on this show.
Well, clearly all that preparation and research has paid off. How long did this production take?
Well, once we knew we were going to make the movie, right? Once we had the green light, we made the movie in 21 months.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty quick turnaround, I think.
Well, what we did is that we launched all of these pipelines at the same time. I feel very fortunate that it worked out that way. In other words, the animation team started and was doing the animation. Ultimately, the animation that was going to be in the movie a year later was being, as we all know, animation takes that long, was being created well before we shot the movie. And then we were shooting the movie and referring back to the animation every day. We had a team of editors who were constantly recutting live action footage against the animation that we had approved, none of which are ever going to align correctly. So we're always trying to mold it. But it really meant it when I said at the top, we were making two movies at the same time.
Obviously films always take a lot of pre-planning because you don't want to, use up so much money in production. Do you feel like this film in particular was more difficult than any sort of hybrid project you've done before?
I don't. They're all so different. They're all so. How we made Gravity was another complete story that was equally difficult and ambitious. Happy Feet the same way. I think what you do. What came with Tom and Jerry was an incredible sense of debt, responsibility, and fear that we don't screw this up, because everybody loves Tom and Jerry. With the other movies I listed there, those are all original. So there's, in some respects, if you screw up, nobody's gonna be mad at you. They'll feel sorry for you. But they're gonna be mad at us if we screw this one up. So that was a big responsibility to carry forward. And then I think deciding and convincing the studio that right now at this stage, we can go with a full 2D Tom and Jerry physicality, or violence, if you want to say it, and the audience will be with us on this. That felt risky. Those are the things that made it hard. Technically, it was. I think technically, I didn't find it difficult, but I found that the real challenge was making sure the two cultures, the culture of live action and visual effects and the culture of animation, finding a way for them to work together, because that's just equals efficiency and equals creativity and excellence if we can get those teams to work. And we did, and they did, and they're wonderful, the cooperation between the two groups.
Yeah, we definitely saw, you were showing us those slates, the process, but we just got a question that's maybe asking for some clarifications. That you first filmed it in live action, and then you passed it to the 3D department, and then you animated over that?
We didn't pass it to the 3D department. We shot it in live action and edited it. Then remember we had animatics, we had arrived at an animation of what we intended the characters to do, the animated characters to do in a scene. So we shot the scene, and we shot in a way that we shot 6K, only requiring 3K. So we had room within the frame to move the camera around. We tiled a lot of the sets so that we could recreate or create new camera work in post. If you're staying with me. And so we would then look at our animatic that we had fallen in love with in pre-production. We went and shot vaguely to that. Then editorial took that, edited the scene, and while they're editing the scene, we had 2D animators literally physically drawing over the scene, and then ultimately filling that in, and then that was composited in editorial. So in the edit room, we're looking at 2D animation, only on 4s and 5s, but over the current cut of the film. Once we decided that we liked that, now we had a cut of a scene with animated characters sketched over it, and not lit and not comped over it in any elegant way, but absolutely representative of the action that we had fallen in love with months before. That then moved over to 3D layout. And in 3D layout, they had to take that, obviously now look at the reference that we had approved and now find a way to replicate that with a 3D model so that it would flow into the final workflow for the movie. And that was a big back and forth, because often once you move to a 3D tool set, a whole host of new variables are introduced, and new artists are introduced. And that was a big part of our effort, was trying to make sure that as new artists came in and began to handle a shot, that they were fully abreast and aware of the work that had been done before, and had the freedom to go down the hall and talk to, if it possible, the animator that had done the original 2D animation. That was why I was so proud of that floor where everybody was on the same floor, because it really facilitated that kind of collaboration.
Yeah, and you should be proud. It's amazing. We're getting close to the end of our allotted time here, and I want to respect your time. So I'm just going to ask one final question from who's asking, how do you plan out a budget for a movie like this with so many different aspects of production? Honestly, it's you budget 2 movies and then you look for redundancies and efficiencies and see if you can eliminate them. And then if nobody notices those redundancies, they become the pad which you need to get through this, because there's a lot of things you don't see down the line. But in the end, really, we budgeted a live action film with no animated characters in it. And then I budgeted a full animated workflow that would deliver the amount of animation we knew we needed. We knew the minutes that we were looking at. It was a classic, just we knew the inventory we were going to have to generate. And then you try and find, those 2 budgets have to come together. There, as I pointed out, there's some redundancies that you might be able to eliminate. But the more important document than the budget, because the budget, yes, it is a challenge, but you do get there. The more important document is the one that I, in my mind, I draw up on on an iPad, and that's what is the workflow? Where is the creative eye going to come in, and where is it going to get challenged, and how do we make sure that the intent of something that we fell in love with sees its way all the way through a very complicated workflow? And those feedback loops, that kind of collaboration is the biggest challenge, I think, in producing a movie like this. And it is the key, and it's without question the key to it being successful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and answering all of our questions. Our apologies for the technical issues at the beginning.
I just want everybody to go see the trailer.
Before we let you go, I'd just like to offer you the chance to, say something else, say anything you might want to say, like just go see the movie.
Oh, God. I say, I'll tell you what's on my mind. Listen, finishing this movie's on my mind. Of course it is. It's a huge deal. And it's been a big undertaking. But what was really on my mind is the future of the film business. And I think it's going to be in all of our hands to take control of this. And that means both going to the movies, so go see this movie that we just did, but also really, for all the people on this call, digging deep and making sure that we create content that warrants everybody getting in a car, driving, in these environments and going to the theaters in the future.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for giving us your valuable time and your valuable information. We're so excited to see it. So everyone, go see the movie.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a great evening.
All right. Bye-bye now.